Hello, everybody, and welcome to a broadcast from the Society of Evidence-Based Policing. My name is Alex Murray. I'm a commander in the Met, responsible for violence and getting violence down in London. And it's a real great pleasure that I have introducing you to Paul Taylor, the first police chief scientific advisor. And we're going to delve into what that means for policing in just a minute. Before I do that, though, I just thought I'd mention what the Society of Evidence-Based Policing is. So we are here, we're a load of police officers, thousands of police officers across the UK and across the world are members of SEBP. They're committed to using the best research evidence to understand what is effective in policing to benefit communities. And we want to use it more, we want to communicate it more, and we want to produce better research evidence. So there's probably no better person to speak to than the Chief Police Scientific Advisor. Evidence-based policing is really about what works, what's effective. And I guess it's rooted in the scientific method around observation, experimentation, rigorous testing, rigorous measuring. And if we're interested in why something is happening, using really good, rigorous qualitative techniques that overcome our own human biases so we can get as close to the truth as possible. And it's therefore really welcome that the UK has appointed a Chief Police Scientific Advisor. And so, Paul, it is really great to have you online. Thanks very much for coming. Great, it's really good to have you. Perhaps you could tell all of us, because it's a relatively new concept in policing, what a Chief Scientific Advisor does and how that Chief Scientific Advisor community works.
Yeah, absolutely. So Chief Scientific Advisors, I think, serve two principal functions. The first is advisory, in the sense that we provide independent scrutiny and challenge to all areas of science and technology. And perhaps even more broadly than that, we give a science opinion on all decision-making and issues that are relevant, in my case, to policing. We do that obviously as individuals, but we also do that by making sure that there's a community around us of experts from industry, from academia, from within our own fold, to really ensure that those voices are well heard and are accounted for in the decision making that we have for science and technology. So that advisory function is a really important thing. And you mentioned there the CSA network. All government departments have, or most government departments, I should say, have chief scientific advisors. And that's a really powerful network, an influential network of science across government. So, you know, when a challenge around achieving net zero comes up, as of course it does within policing, I can reach out to that network and get perspectives which are far different from my own, and expert advice that's far different from my own. So that's one side of the function. The other side, I would say, is strategic. And within policing, that's very much around trying to encourage coherence, synergies, and identifying areas and barriers even, which can be removed to really crank up the innovation, the adoption of evidence within all corners of policing. In the police sphere, that's a complex landscape. And so I feel that my job is really to try and enable all of the capabilities and in particular do a lot of work reaching out to what I would call the broader science ecosystem. So how can we ensure that police work effectively with industry? How can we ensure that our police capabilities are engaged well with academia so that we can secure EU funding and UKRI funding to drive forward big initiatives? The only way, and SEBP is a great example, but the only way we're going to make progress quickly is to do it as a larger community. And part of my job is to ensure that larger community can prosper as fast as possible.
Thanks, it's really interesting. Perhaps can I throw some examples in, and you tell me how you might be involved. So, okay. Both of them. So, say the National Police Chiefs Council, I've got a great idea, and they say, look, we want to do this. Or the Home Office policy unit working in policing says, look, I think, Minister, this is a great intervention that we should all be doing. Do we, NPCC and the Home Office, come to you and go, what do you think, Paul?
That would be one route, absolutely. So we might take it, for example, to the Science Advisory Council that we're currently setting up in the NPCC, and we would say that this is the evidence base. We feel that this is a robust, strong evidence base that shows clear effect. What do you as an independent council think of this evidence? Where is it weak? Where might we need to strengthen it, and so on? Alternatively, we might say, well, actually, if we look at this evidence, it's taken us so far, and we as a community know that actually we might need to run a few more trials. So perhaps it's been developed in an experimental setting, and we might need to go and trial it within a couple of forces. That's the sort of thing that my office would try and facilitate, so that we get to that next level of evidence. And once we reach that point where we have a strong, robust argument, absolutely taking it to Chiefs Council and seeing what the Chiefs collectively think of that approach, and whether we might endorse it nationally and how we might resource it nationally would be a way forward.
Oh, that's interesting. I've got so many questions to ask you. Your point around cranking up innovation, I think I'll come to later, because I would like to explore how we can do that. You're relatively new, Paul, into this field. Where have you come from? What's your background? What's your interests? How did you get appointed?
Well, so interestingly, my PhD, if we want to go back that far, was in hostage negotiation. So I spent lots of time at the old Scotland Yard working with teams around negotiation. And advising then as a psychology by my background, but advising from that perspective. And some of those negotiations that we were involved in had a extremism angle, terrorism angle, and that pulled me into that area of expertise, being able to understand issues around motivation of terrorists, and being able to explain those from an academic point of view became really important. That led really to a career that I've had between law enforcement and security, both working at Lancaster University, setting up the Cross-Faculty Institute, which is very broad in its application of evidence into policing security, everything from the arts through to engineering and computing. And actually, most of our successes came when we started to blend those disciplines. Really exciting kind of developments. And then subsequent to that, running the Centre for Research and Evidence of Security Threats, which is the UKIC and Home Office funded National Centre for Behavioural Science. So much more narrow in its application, but much deeper. And I think quite unusually for an ESRC centre, spending a lot of effort and time getting evidence into practice. Really thinking about how you can translate that evidence and demonstrably show that what's been shown in academia, in experimental settings or through other types of research can have practical impact, and spending a lot of time on that. So from my hostage negotiation beginnings, leading quite wide portfolios of research and quite narrow but deeper portfolios of research.
So I might just unpick some acronyms there. So UKIC, UK Intelligence Community, and ESRC, European Social Research Council, a huge
Economic and Social Research Council. Absolutely, one of our large research councils here in the UK that fund research. Yeah, and probably the one most relevant to many members of SEBP.
Yeah, and so I guess your field of expertise, particularly early on, was around negotiation, and I imagine that was quite an area where lots of people have got a lot of ideas and a lot of views, not unlike most things in policing. And I guess it's quite interesting bringing in you and how did you apply scientific rigor to the plethora of ideas that people had around, oh, well, this is how you should negotiate, or this is how you should negotiate, because I've got so much experience negotiating, I know this works. How did you weave your way through all of that?
So it's really interesting. Negotiation is a field where you're right, there's lots of people, experts, but very few academics, actually. Very few researchers doing this work. So my approach to it was to take transcripts of actual incidents to examine those, to code those in meaningful, robust, reliable ways, and examine the patterns of what ifs led to what, what cues led to what responses, what ifs led to what outcomes. Through many of the tools we would expect in evidence-based policing, that kind of analysis, that comparative analysis, really start to begin to work out how communication works within those crisis environments, and how certain approaches to dealing with challenges led to certain responses on average, so that we could then expose those back to the negotiators, both through training in real time where it was relevant to do so, and in debriefings to give a better understanding of what was going on in those processes. Interesting, most of my career has been built, academic research career at least, has been built out of quantifying the qualitative. Really value taken from taking something that you kind of get a sense from it, and that's not to discredit qualitative. We may come back to the value of qualitative work to answer particular research questions later, but to take the qualitative, quantify it, and then be able to do controlled comparative analyses to identify what's going on there.
Yeah. So for SEBP, we're sort of obsessed in getting nuggets out to people that are really useful. And most police officers, I guess they're not negotiators, but they will have gone to situations where you need a negotiator, and they will know negotiators. Some of our executive committee are prolific negotiators here in London. So in the spirit of trying to release a nugget out into the evidence-based policing community, what was your finding? Your 1 minute elevator pitch around what you discovered was effective around negotiation, and then we'll go back to being a chief scientific advisor again.
Okay. So the first nugget is that the model that I produced was not the model that is now widely taught around the world. It was adopted and taken on by forces and has been used in different ways. And that's kind of a pre-nugget. But just to say, I think that's a really exciting thing that as an academic should embrace. Sometimes you can hold quite tightly to your baby and not want to let it go. But actually, I've learned a lot from the way it's been applied. So I produced a model that helps you understand the motivation or the why behind the communication of anyone at any particular time. So to really try and interpret that. And the dimension of that model that's been most useful is the motivational frames, so instrumental, relational, or identity framing. And this is the notion that at any one point in time, you will try and communicate a particular thing. It could be facts and wants. So this is largely an instrumental conversation that we're having now, but that's not the only reason you communicate. So sometimes you communicate for relational reasons. So I might try and throw in a terrible joke in a minute, Alex, and the point of the joke is not to communicate that to your membership, but just to engage the trust in the relationship between yourself and I. And then still other times, actually, the point of communication is what we would call identity focused. So it might be to criticize you or compliment you and so on. That's broadly known, those three types of communication. But what's critical and what the evidence shows is if I'm speaking instrumentally and you're worried about identity, we're not going to get anywhere in the conversation. So if I'm saying to you, look, I want to get a pizza into you because I can imagine you're really hungry, and getting food in is a great thing to do in many crisis negotiation settings. And you're sat there worried about, oh my goodness, my head's going. Are you going to shoot me? What's going on here? You're not worried when I ask you, do you want pepperoni on your pizza? We're not going to. We're talking at cross purposes. So I'm being a slightly light, although serious example. But actually that becoming in sync, in better understanding the motivational driver of what somebody is describing, and then linking into that and being in sync with that has been shown to really accelerate cooperation, not just in negotiation settings, but also in interview settings, in CHIS environments, and so on.
So it's instrumental, identity. What was the third one?
Relational.
So if I guess if I'm interested in how my relationship is with you, then and I'm wanting to build rapport, then it will be about me and you, reciprocity, and building that relationship.
Exactly that.
So it feels like you're teaching us a lesson in how to negotiate, but also how our marriage could be more successful.
I'll leave you to speculate on that one. Yeah.
You heard it here first on SEBP, folks. We're not just helping you with policing, we're helping you with your personal relationships. Thanks very much. So I guess back to being a chief scientific advisor then, what's your vision for what you want to do with policing over the next couple of years? And what is your tenure, by the way?
Let's deal with the easier question first. Then the tenure of any CSA is typically a 3-year tenure with potentially an extension, and that is deliberate. And I think it's a good thing, because what it means is that our careers are not bound into the role, so that we can give independent challenge and advice without fearing for our promotion or whatever prospects. There's also a sense that if you have a new CSA every 3 to 5 years, they inject new energy, new ideas, new expertise even. So that's the tenure, the question. So for me, next couple of years really reflect socializing, cementing in a new office. As you said at the beginning, this is a new CSA role. And one has to establish that office and really find out where it can be useful. And as I mentioned earlier, where actually things are running quite smoothly and light touch and support is the best solution. So for this financial year in particular, we're working extensively on the National Science and Technology Strategy, of which we hope that all members and all members of the community, and by that I mean the larger community, including academia and industry, will feed in their views of what they think might be important and what the barriers are that any strategy ought to try and address. And that strategy is important when it comes to thinking about where we're going to invest our efforts in the next 3, 5, 10, even 20 years to drive forward science and technology and policing. So that's a really key piece of work that we need to put there, so that we can kind of base all of our subsequent decisions around that. But
and that is a policing strategy for science and technology.
Correct.
And off that will hang, perhaps, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm speculating, some spending review decisions. You can guide decisions for chief officers in relation to investment in particular areas, for example, and also build collaborations with capabilities that sit outside policing to best meet those challenges. Would I be right?
That's very eloquently said. Absolutely, absolutely that. And of course, the national strategy, also hanging off the national strategy, of course, are roadmaps or strategies for each of our capabilities. So it is not for me to dictate, for example, how forensics develops. The forensic community has its own roadmap of how it wants to develop. Mine is a strategy that says, how can I facilitate that? What kind of systems, what kind of processes, what kind of infrastructure can be in place that will really help policing achieve its ambitions? So
how are you going to write that strategy, I guess, with us and with the community? How does that operate?
Yeah, so we're at the beginnings of it. We've started to put together working groups. We started to do a set of interviews with key stakeholders. And coming down the pipeline will be wider consultations where people can feed in.
Great. Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah. And I mean, the other thing that perhaps not all listeners will realise, that one of the things that CSAs own are something called the areas of research interest, which are ARIs. And obviously the strategy feeds into the ARIs or vice versa. And ARIs are really crucial because what they are doing is telling everybody publicly those questions that we feel we most need answered, so that academia and industry can consult the ARIs and either work towards them and think, yes, we can answer those questions, or begin to challenge us and suggest that other questions should have appeared in there. It's a way of kind of engaging with the community and letting them know our state of play and what we feel will be most impactful. Yeah,
interesting. I'm just going to go down a rabbit hole now, sort of unscripted, but I'd love your view on this, and I think you've got some insight into this area. So I was reading a interview this morning with the head of maths for Ocado, the online shopping.
Okay.
And basically how her skills feed the construction of algorithms that service demand and supply, warehouse capacity, distance traveled, food going off, minimizing food wastage. and how with the absence of that sort of algorithmic intelligence, the whole model of Ocado and most online businesses, certainly Amazon, of course, goes to pot, and how those companies also protect their maths very rigorously because it gives people a competitive advantage. This is the rabbit hole, really. I'm just feeling a real deficit of vision and capability in policing around that sort of area at the moment. We seem to not be doing anything in that area, but focusing quite a lot on the ethics of it before we've even realized any capability associated with it. I've got my own sort of hypothesis, being a digital immigrant myself, born before 1983, that I can understand ethics. I can't understand Python, so I'm going to concentrate on ethics rather than the value of Python. But I'm just interested in your views, really, I guess, off the science and technology strategy and around sophisticated analysis within policing.
Yeah, okay, so there's more going on than you suspect. We are extremely good at hiding our lights under bushels. I mean, one of the delights of my role currently is that I get to go around the country, and some of the things that I've seen, some of the innovations are just wonderful. I mean, I've had the opportunity to work in different areas of government, and I've always been quite keen to stress when I can that there in no way is policing behind the curve. There are things in science and technology that perhaps we do need to get up to speed with, but there are other areas where we really lead, and in innovation, that's one of those. The second interesting point that you raised there is that often the discussions around AI and machine learning are around that kind of predictive policing, very much, I can't remember the name of the film now, but that kind of Minority Report style. But actually for policing, the biggest benefits of those technologies come in automation. It comes in speeding up processes. So rather than filling out paper by hand in triplicate, we're able to automate it. Rather than have manually officers looking through, say, video material for an extensive period of time for an investigation, we can trim that down and prioritize what material they look through so that we save resources. So actually those technologies, in my view, will likely, certainly in the short term, have the biggest impact on policing through automation, as opposed to some of those other things that are often discussed in the ethics fold.
Yeah, thank you. Really interesting. Well, perhaps for another time, your insight into some of the great stuff and groundbreaking stuff where we're using that sort of.
So there are lots of, I mean, there are many communities. So Police Rewired is one example of a community of officers from around the country who do coding. I won't say for fun, but they take projects. They probably do it for fun and pizza, but they take projects and apply their expertise. And it's a great example of that type of innovation, recognizing the value that can happen.
Yeah, well, our great producer, you can't see her online now, Suzanne, but Suzanne, if you can find the Police Rewired connection / social media link and stick it on the bottom of this, that would be wonderful. Can I ask you, in your experience of policing before and now as Chief Scientific Advisor, what can we as the police do better?
Well, I'm not sure.
How should we change?
Yeah, okay. So I think that's a very difficult question to answer very quickly. I think actually the trajectory of travel in relation to science and technology over the last 3 to 5 years has changed, has accelerated, and is going in the right direction. It feels like a special time to be involved in S&T in policing. And of course, I would say that now that I'm the new CSA, but you can go to any area of policing now and you can see the influence of evidence base. You can see the scientific thinking. You can see the desire to engage with academia or with industry to drive forward a better understanding of the phenomenon that's being examined, and then work to try and work out what types of interventions are likely to be the most fruitful, how can we gain efficiency, and so on. So, how can we get better? I think we're on that journey. And I think the exciting role that I can play is to ensure that we do that efficiently and effectively and in a way that's value for money to the public.
Yeah, thanks. So I guess this will largely be listened to by the community of evidence-based policing practitioners, both police officers and professional researchers, hopefully others as well. And how do you think we will feel your presence and the presence of your role? What benefit will it bring?
Okay, so I think there are several things that I contribute to. The first is around really helping the broadening funding landscape understand the priorities and the value that evidence-based policing can bring, and hopefully opening up opportunities both for police colleagues to engage, but also for academic and industry colleagues to engage. The more we can socialise and speak about the value of evidence-based policing within the strategy and within other top-level fora, the more we can begin to kind of crystallise other funding models, infrastructures and things that will help. In other words, make it the norm to do these things. And that's been a gradual process, of course, it has across a decade. The second thing that my office is responsible for and I'm really keen on is open science. So this is ensuring that data, that materials, that pre-registration happens and ultimately the reports are made open access. That again, allowing everybody to learn from one another. It's part of the UK government's open government agenda, but we need to really try and drive that forward. The more we can particularly make data available, I think, the better the responses that we get from the community. And of course, there are sensitivities to that, no doubt, but there are ways to overcome those sensitivities. There are ways to share that data in meaningful ways, and perhaps actually sometimes we need to develop those. I think that's really important. And then the third thing, as I've mentioned several times, is I see science and technology as something that everybody should own. It should be part of a community, and activities from my office that help drive that community forward, be that annual conferences where we promote science, be that engaging with different sectors, I think will be really important for members and a way in for members to engage with a broader set of stakeholders.
So I guess, I mean, it's really encouraging to hear, and in a way, tangentially, probably not overtly, you're influencing all officers on the street. Just some of the innovations that you would push and encourage. The point you made, if we go back to the conversation around machine learning, the amount of officers who are spending hours watching videos, following homicides, decades worth of man hours and staff hours, and it will be truly transformational. So yeah, it's good. It's really good to have you on board.
I'd go further than that. As I argued at the Police Superintendent Association last week, the frontline officer is the most important person in the science journey, because actually the thing that scientists really want are problems, and it's the owners of the problems that are the most important person in that journey. If you can communicate that problem, get that problem to us, then the scientific method and everybody can work towards that. But oftentimes we don't know that goal. And you'll appreciate this, but in my own background of hostage negotiation, was a wonderful PhD student, now an academic in the Netherlands, Miriam Oestinger, who was looking around for a project to do within the hostage negotiation arena. And it was over a drink at the bar where she spoke to a police officer who simply said, mistakes. We all make mistakes. I have no idea how to recover from a mistake. What should I do? What impact does it have? And that set her off on probably a career's worth of journey, examining that issue, that really critical issue that no one had ever looked at before. So,
and mistakes in a negotiation. So I'm negotiating with you and I make an error. It makes the relationship bad. How do I recover that relationship?
You call me Mike rather than Paul, and I get upset by that slur. How do you recover? And genuinely, feel that quite strongly, that actually the problem owners, which is often those on the front line, are the people who should be driving science and technology, at least by telling us the problems that they are having so that we know what we need to solve.
So there's probably a bit of a bridge here, but how how can frontline officers, frontline staff tell you, the scientific community, the problems? And by the way, I think one of the answers is through the Society of Evidence-Based Policing. Folks, you can contact us, your regional coordinator. We've got relationships with professional researchers. You can email us and tell us what some of the problems are. But what's your view, Mike?
Yeah, it's a great question. So obviously we've spoken about the strategy. That would be one way. Social media is another way. We're in the process of setting up a web presence for science in policing, and that hopefully will provide a way forward. There is never going to be one channel, is there? And I think it's a process of living and learning and identifying what works. And frankly, from my own perspective, going and visiting people and hearing from them firsthand, which is how we do it.
Yeah, well, we'll certainly link to your website when it's up and running. Great, good stuff. Well, I'm really grateful, Mike, that you can speak to us. I'm going to call you that from now on. Is there anything else you'd like to, I guess, bring through this interview to officers, professionals watching this with the advent of, I guess, your tenure, really?
Oh God. Well, so one of the things I didn't realise until we spoke before this meeting was how large and the society is. Right? It's absolutely wonderful, the number of people who engage with that community. It's clearly an important community, not least because it's bringing together people, as you said at the beginning, from different countries, but also from different parts of policing, and engaging those with the academic experts and industry experts. That's exactly the sort of thing that I think should be happening. And driving forward that evidence is really important. Where I think we always have room for improvement is around creating cumulative work and ensuring that the expertise and the leadership is distributed across a wide set of stakeholders within the community. And I think that's a really exciting thing that SEBP can promote and engage.
SEBP's strong in the UK, US, Australia, New Zealand, growing in Canada. Do they have CSAs as well? And what's the international CSA footprint look like?
Yeah, so those countries have a chief scientific advisor, as in the Sir Patrick equivalent, but many of them don't have department CSAs. We in the UK lead the world in that sense, that we have that really very rich network of CSAs that we can draw upon. But part of my role, of course, is to reach out internationally, and those police forces and others do have science experts. And if nothing else, I think it's actually quite important for us to deconflict, so that we're not funding the same piece of work and we share best practice. Great stuff.
Well, it's really good to have had you online for this interview. Folks, if you want to join the Society of Evidence-Based Policing and become one of the community, it takes about 10 seconds from the SEBP website. Also, if you've got any questions you'd like to ask Paul, when we broadcast this on YouTube, LinkedIn and Twitter, please do. I'll gather those questions, and if it's okay, Paul, I'll send them to you, and we might create a form where we can put some of the answers back as well. But it's a great privilege for us to be able to speak to you, and hope you have a good rest of the day.
Well, privilege.
Thank you.
Bye.